I will take the president at his word. Any vote that might lead to war should be hard, but I cast it with conviction.
I never would have given President Bush the authority. I warned at the time it was not authority for a preemptive war. I believe we should withdraw, starting within 60 days of my becoming president.
It is with conviction that I support this resolution as being in the best interests of our nation. A vote for it is not a vote to rush to war. It is a vote that puts awesome responsibility in the hands of our president.
Mexico is such an important problem. Mexican government's policies are pushing migration north. There isn't any sensible approach except to do what we need to do simultaneously, secure our borders with technology, personnel, physical barriers if necessary in some places, and we need to have tougher employer sanctions, and we need to try to incentivize Mexico to do more. If they've committed transgressions of whatever kind, they should be obviously deported.
Hillary decided to profile Hispanics as drug dealers. Specifically, Arkansas troopers were to stop and search cars driven by Hispanics. Clinton's criminal apprehension program was ruled unconstitutional.
More than 700 Palestinians have died. Right. More than 30 Israelis have died, most of them civilians.
Such a tragic situation. I think Hamas intended to provoke Israel, because that's why they started the rocket fire again. And then Hamas, which has its back against the wall, decided to once again fire rockets into Israel. I and everybody who is seeing these terrible pictures on our TV hope there can be a ceasefire and try to end the killing and try to prevent the unbelievable heartbreak that we see happening.
It was the appropriate response, you think?
Well, I think what the problem is, and this is something, I'm not a military planner, sure, but Hamas puts its missiles, its rockets in civilian areas. Part of it is that Gaza's pretty small and it's very densely populated. They put their command and control of Hamas military leaders in those civilian areas. Israel, I know, has sent warnings and tried to get people to move. But in any kind of conflict, there are going to be civilian casualties. Part of it is that Gaza's pretty small.
Rebel forces in southern Sudan began using child soldiers long before seceding from Sudan in 2011. The United States, on the other hand, passed a law in 2008 that banned providing military assistance to nations that use child soldiers. The law was called the Child Soldiers Prevention Act, or CISPA. After South Sudan's independence, the White House issued annual waivers that kept aid flowing to the world's newest nation despite its use of child soldiers. State Department played a central role in issuing the controversial waivers, according to two sources, including a former State Department official.
It was supposed to be an example of Hillary Clinton's battle-tested experience.
I remember landing under sniper fire.
In the speech last week, Senator Clinton was referring to her visit to Tuzla, Bosnia in 1996 as First Lady. The brutal war was over, but hostilities continued. And though the trip was exactly 12 years ago tomorrow, the memories seemed etched in Clinton's mind.
There was supposed to be some kind of a greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base.
Problem is, that's not what happened. And we should know, CBS News accompanied the First Lady and daughter Chelsea on that Bosnia trip. That's Senator Clinton talking to me on the military flight into Tuzla. And these are the pictures we recorded of the greeting ceremony when the plane landed. Compare that to Senator Clinton's account.
I remember landing under sniper fire. There was no greeting ceremony, and we basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
Thank you.
Article came out in the Daily Mail titled "Decorated Green Beret is Kicked Out of U.S. Army Special Forces After Shoving Afghan Police Commander Who Raped Boy Who Was 12 Years Old and Then Beat Up His Mother When She Reported the Crime to Higher-Ups." And now you have a decorated soldier who was with the U.S. Army Special Forces for 11 years. He is now being kicked out after he stood up for a young rape victim and his mother who were beaten by this rogue police commander. And this is what's been sanctioned by the U.S. State Department. Now, this incident happened with Sergeant Martland back in 2011. Now, guess who was in charge of the State Department in 2011? none other than presidential hopeful Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, she is the reason that this soldier is essentially being punished. It says here in March of 2014, the U.S. State Department acknowledged the centuries-old practice had become a problem, yet that followed the Obama administration issuing a new Army manual telling troops not to judge Afghan social customs, such as the practice of bacha bazi.
Again, we were misled that there was supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact.
But
and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
She's lying. She's absolutely lying. She told me something entirely different at the casket ceremony. She said it was the cause of the video, and that she would get back to me and tell me what happened with my son.
And she said, we are going to have the filmmaker arrested who was responsible for the death of your son. And I think that you should look at everything she said. She made this statement not only to me, but to other family members. Also, a half hour after this happened, when they had the casket ceremony, she also lied to the American public because she said, and these are her words as best as I can recall, rage was directed at American embassies as a result of that awful video that we were not responsible for.
We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with.
She stood in front of my son's casket and blamed the rage directed at American embassies upon the video.
How does it feel to know that she told her family that your nephew died in an Al-Qaeda-like terrorist attack, but then she told your family that he died in a protest gone wrong because of a video?
That's consistent to her career as a serial liar. Without a doubt, you know, Mrs. Clinton really has a problem embracing the truth.
Secretary Clinton, a few days after the attack, what did she tell you then about your brother's death?
I spoke to my family about how sad that we should feel for the Libyan people because they're uneducated and that breeds fear, which breeds violence and leads to a protest. And, you know, I remember thinking at the time, wow, you know, how selfish of me. I never really thought about the Libyan people. I've been so consumed with my own grief and loss and concern. And, you know, when I think back now to that day and what she knew, you know, it shows me a lot about her character that she would choose in that moment to basically perpetuate what she knew was untrue.
There was never a video-inspired protest in Benghazi. Her spokesperson at the State Department, hours after the attack, said this: Benghazi has been attacked by militants. 1 hour before the attack in Benghazi, Chris Stevens walks the diplomat to the front gate. The ambassador didn't report a demonstration. He didn't report it because it never happened. An eyewitness in the command center that night on the ground said no protests, no demonstration. 2 intelligence reports that day. No protest, no demonstration. The attack starts at 3:42 Eastern Time, ends at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night. At 4:06, an ops alert goes out across the State Department. It says this: mission under attack, armed men, shots fired, explosions heard. No mention of a video, no mention of a protest, no mention of a demonstration. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an Al-Qaeda-like group. I had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this: we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. You had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him: Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility.
I'll leave it to others to characterize this report, but I think it's pretty clear it's time to move on.
How do you feel, Dorothy, when you hear that response?
Well, it likens back to what I just said. I think that nobody in government can tell me how I feel, what I should feel about it. She has no right, nor does anyone in government have the right to tell me it's time to move on. They're not in my shoes. I think that, that's the essence of what they have done, is they've been dismissive.
Secretary Clinton, we know that you, and you've talked about this, you encouraged the president to intervene in Libya in 2011. Recently, President Obama said his worst mistake in office was probably failing to plan for the day after what he thought was the right thing to do in intervening there.